Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when your neighbors might accuse you of witchcraft if you laughed too loud, talked too little, or heaven forbid, owned a black cat. You've wandered into the year 1692, and snow crunches underfoot as you approach the tightly clustered wooden houses of Salem Village, Massachusetts. Chimneys smoke in the distance. The wind carries the faint sounds of livestock and hushed conversations laced with paranoia. People here don't smile much. And honestly, if you had to live without coffee color or weekends, you probably wouldn't either. It's cold. The kind of cold that seeps through your gloves, even the imaginary ones, and sinks into your bones. The wooden structures seem to creak with suspicion. Everyone's watching everyone else. You clear your throat, and someone glances over, as if you might be in league with Satan. Congratulations. You've officially arrived in the middle of one of the strangest mass panics in American history. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, at least not socially. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake enough, drop a comment with your location and the current time. I love seeing where in the world you all tune in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward. A thin layer of frost rims the bare tree branches. The sound of a church bell breaks the quiet, low and solemn, a reminder that this is no ordinary village. You pass narrow fences and homes so plain they make oatmeal look spicy. No colorful shutters, no laughter drifting from open windows. Here, even joy is rationed. The Puritans don't play around, literally. Games are banned. Dancing is discouraged. Singing is fine, but only if it's to praise God or to confess your sins. Bonus points if it's both. Salem isn't just one place, by the way. It's two. There's Salem Town, bustling coastal more mercantile, and Salem Village, the quiet hilly farmland where tonight's slow burn drama unfolds. You're in the village where folks are more likely to talk about your eternal soul than your crop yield. This place isn't just spiritually intense, it's practically pressure cooked with religious anxiety. Everyone's worried about the devil, their neighbors, and whether God's judgment might strike before breakfast. You keep walking. Overhead, the moon hangs like a silver coin in the night sky, clear and bright in the New England air. You hear a faint rustling, maybe a squirrel, maybe something less natural. Here, even ordinary sounds make people pause. You pass the meeting house, the heart of the village, a square building where sermons last hours and the benches feel like pennants. If you yawned, you'd probably be accused of sloth, or worse. This is a world without innocent until proven guilty. The assumption is flipped, especially if you're a woman elderly or just weird. People already believe the devil walks among them, whispering in ears and twisting hearts. He's like a celebrity here, gets mentioned more than the governor, and unfortunately the Puritan rulebook is broad enough to make anyone look guilty. Do you talk to yourself? That's a red flag. Own a cookbook suspicious. Live alone with a cat and some herbs, definitely a witch. As you meander toward the parsonage, Reverend Samuel Parris's house, you sense a subtle shift. Candles burn late behind the shutters. The Reverend's household is unusually quiet, and it's not because they're out of chores. Inside, something strange is happening. His daughter Betty and niece Abigail are having fits. Not the kind cured by a good nap or a hearty stew. No, these are wild, thrashing, bone-twisting fits. They scream. They contort. They claim to see shapes, shadows, figures that no one else can see. It starts small, like most disasters. A child twitching, a neighbor whispering. But it's winter, and there's not much else to talk about. And once something smells like Satan, it spreads. Soon, others say they're afflicted too. Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Elizabeth Hubbard. The list grows. You'd think it was contagious. Except it's not really illness they're catching. It's attention, and maybe power. Historians still argue whether the girls truly believed they were bewitched, or whether it all began as theater and spiraled out of control. You pause at the edge of the parsonage yard. The moonlight catches on the frost. Something about this feels fragile, like standing on ice and hearing it crack. The village is about to fall into something deep and cold and dangerous. Not because of demons, but because people believe in them so hard they'll accuse their own mothers, their own pastors, their own friends. There's something terrifying about how fast it happens. One day you're sweeping your doorstep. The next, you're being dragged to court because someone dreamed you turned into a cat. And no one will think that sounds crazy. Not here. Not now. Logic doesn't stand a chance when fear grabs the mic. For now, though, it's still just whispers. You turn back toward the village path. Snowflakes drift down, soft as breath. The fires inside homes have gone quiet, but behind every shutter, someone is awake, watching, listening, waiting for the next name to fall from trembling lips, and maybe they're hoping it won't be theirs. You keep walking. The air is heavier now, not in weight, but in worry. Around you, Salem village breathes through gritted teeth. Somewhere behind a shutter, a baby cries. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. In a place where the devil might lurk in your chimney or curl up in your bread oven, even the innocent sounds feel suspect. As you make your way past the frozen well, you try to understand what kind of world would make a child's tantrum spiral into courtroom drama. And it starts with the people themselves. Puritans. Just the name sounds like it might scold you. These were English Protestants who didn't just want to reform the church, they wanted to detox it in the most intense way possible. Their theology was strict, their lifestyles stricter, and their views on fun. Let's just say if you liked maypoles, you'd probably be burned at the stake symbolically, if not literally. The Puritans believed that God was always watching, but so was everyone else. A full-time surveillance state, but powered by gossip and God. You trudge past the meeting house again. That's the nerve center. Sermons here don't soothe, they command. Reverend Paris and others preached fire and brimstone, not peace and compassion. Sin wasn't just bad, it was inevitable. And salvation rare. Most people were probably going to hell, and the Puritans were totally okay with that, unless it was them, in which case, panic. Your salvation wasn't something you earned. It was pre-decided by God. The best you could do was behave like you were chosen and hope no one noticed when you tripped up. Here, even ordinary behaviors had spiritual meanings. A dropped spoon could be divine punishment. A nosebleed might mean you're cursed. And if you were female, things were especially complicated. Women were seen as spiritually weaker, more temptable, like walking gateways for the devil. So if a young girl said you sent your spirit to pinch her in her sleep, well, guess who's on trial before you can say, I just wanted to sell my jam. You keep close to a low fence. It's wood gray and splintered with age. You hear faint voices from a nearby barn, two men debating grain prices, but their tones are tense. No one speaks casually anymore. Everyone knows someone who's been accused or is about to be. But the roots of this suspicion didn't grow overnight. There were long-standing divisions in the village, feuds over land, over inheritance, over whose cow wandered into whose garden. And you better believe that in a place where gossip can get you executed, a wandering cow is political dynamite. Historians still argue whether the trials were mostly about religion or more about power and property. The Putnam family, for instance, was deeply involved in accusing others, especially those who disagreed with them. Was this holy justice or strategic neighbor pruning? Some say the trials were less about witches and more about who controlled the village's future. But in a theocracy, saying your enemy is a sinner is the fastest way to gain ground, spiritually and literally. You stop to rest by a log pile, the cold nipping at your ears. You remember that most of the people in this village believed they were good, that their suffering pleased God. That doubt was a sin. That harshness was strength. It's a terrifying thing to realize that cruelty can feel righteous when it wears the right hat and quotes enough scripture. There's no laughter here, no music except for hymns, no dancing except in warning stories. Joy is suspect, pleasure is weakness, but fear is useful. It sharpens community bonds and explains why bad things happen. Drought devil, sickness devil, a cow refusing to give milk witchcraft. You'd think they would have checked the cow first, but no. It's always Satan. The young people of Salem are especially squeezed. Teenagers today think they have it rough, but imagine living in a place where puberty plus piety equals panic. Girls were expected to be silent, obedient, and religious. But they were also told that Satan especially liked to tempt them. It's a lose-lose, like trying to stay dry while swimming upstream through holy water. You pass the house of one of the afflicted girls, its shutters drawn. Inside she might be sleeping or pretending to. Maybe she believes what she saw. Maybe she's just relieved to be noticed. The girls at the heart of the panic were suddenly important. Adults listened. The village bent to their words. In a world where they had no power, this must have felt like flying, or floating, or maybe like a lie that got out of hand. There's a curious stillness in the village tonight, but beneath it is tension tight. Breathless tension, like someone wound the place up too tight and now everyone's waiting for the snap. The fear here is both real and imagined. And that's what makes it so potent. You can't see it, you can't touch it, but you can feel it in the way people look at each other and how they don't look at you. As you head toward the edge of the village, you try to imagine what it would take to convince an entire community that the devil was in their neighbor's soup pot. It turns out not very much. Just a few girls, a suspicious minister, a bitter winter, and a community already trained to see sin in every sneeze. Welcome to Salem population terrified. You step beyond the main cluster of homes, now out where the snow is less trampled, the fences more jagged, and the silence more complete. This is the fringe of Salem Village, where suspicion sticks thicker than smoke. As your boots crunch across the frostbitten path, you spot the house of Sarah Good, one of the first women accused of witchcraft. It's small, cramped, the kind of place that whispers poverty before you even knock. Sarah's life was hard even by 1692 standards. Her husband died in debt, leaving her to scrape together a living however she could. That often meant begging from neighbors who didn't love being reminded that destitution could be just one bad harvest away. She muttered when she walked away. She had unkempt hair. She smelled a little strange. Honestly, she checked all the boxes for witch in Puritan terms, mainly because she checked none of the boxes for respectable neighbor. You pause outside her home, picturing her sitting by a cold hearth, clutching her daughter Dorothy, just 4 years old. Dorothy would also be accused, by the way, because in Salem, no one's too young to consort with the devil. When Sarah was questioned, she mumbled, didn't answer clearly, claimed innocence, but lacked the kind of polished poise the court liked. Her every awkward pause was taken as guilt. One judge even said, she is full of lies. Well, so is a toddler, but no one's dragging them to court except, oh, right they did. Historians still argue whether Sarah's erratic behavior was mental illness, malnutrition, or just the kind of despair that makes people mutter to themselves. But in Salem, anything outside the norm was suspect, especially if you were a woman, especially if you were poor, especially if people already thought your presence turned their bread sour. Beside her was Sarah Osborne, another accused woman. She was ill-bedridden and had the audacity to fight her late husband's will to claim land. Scandalous. She didn't attend church regularly. She had disputes with the powerful Putnam family. That alone might have signed her death warrant. Her sin wasn't devilry, it was defiance. She challenged the social order, and that was often treated as worse than heresy. And then there was Tituba, a name that still lingers in every book, every film, every whispered retelling of the trials. An enslaved woman of indigenous or African descent brought to Salem by Reverend Paris. Her stories, likely drawn from her own cultural roots, were exotic and frightening to the Puritans. When the girls cried out and the pressure rose, Tituba confessed, said she had seen the devil, claimed there were witches, even described strange animals and spirits. It was probably a performance, a survival strategy, because in that moment, a confession might be the only thing that kept the noose at bay. You find yourself standing beneath a tree with limbs that crackle like old bones. It's not hard to imagine them tying ropes to these branches, even though the real hangings took place on Gallows Hill. Still, the thought hangs heavy. Not because of the violence, though, that's there too, but because of the speed at which neighbors turned on each other. Tituba's confession opened the floodgates. Once you say there are witches, someone has to be one. And who better than the woman you already resent for borrowing sugar and not returning it? The accusations spread like fire through dry pine. Suddenly, it wasn't just 3 women, it was dozens. If someone had looked at you funny last week, you remembered it now. If your calf miscarried, if your chimney smoked weird, if your baby cried after a visit, boom, you had a suspect. The afflicted girls wailed in court, fell into fits, screamed about specters. And the judges, they nodded solemnly and took notes. That's the part that sticks even now. The court believed spectral evidence, the idea that someone's spirit could hurt you while their body sat harmlessly at home. Think about that. You could be milking your cow, and someone could say your ghost clawed their face in a dream. And that, held up in court, You can't exactly disprove a nightmare. Try arguing with that logic, and the next thing you know, your name's on the list too. You cross a frozen patch of stream and hear the wind whistling through the bare trees. It sounds like voices, or maybe that's just your brain doing its late-night mischief. In Salem, you wouldn't want to mention that out loud. If you said, "I think the wind whispered my name," congratulations, you've just invited a legal inquiry into your soul. If you don't mention it, though, and someone else says they heard it, well, now you're guilty for hiding things. It wasn't just women, by the way. Men were accused too, but fewer and often as accessories. Witches were seen as female by default, products of Eve's original sin twisted into temptation. Still, Giles Corey, an elderly farmer, would be pressed to death for refusing to enter a plea. His crime, not participating in a system he saw as corrupt. They laid heavy stones on his chest until he died. His last words, reportedly more weight. Now that's a mic drop, 1690s edition. You pass by the meeting house again. It's darker now, the night sinking into itself. But inside your mind, the flickers of torchlight dance behind your eyelids. The murmurs of accusation never stop. The village may be quiet on the surface, but underneath it boils. Grudges dressed in scripture. Fear disguised as justice. You take one last look at Sarah Good's humble home. She would be hanged, along with many others. But for now, she's still here, sitting in the dark, clutching her daughter, wondering what she did wrong. And the scariest part, the answer might be nothing at all. You continue past the last of the crooked homes where the fences thin out and the trees lean in like they're eavesdropping. The village fades behind you, but the fear follows like a shadow. It's hard to shake the feeling that even the snow is watching. Ahead, the courthouse looms more modest than majestic, but still somehow foreboding. Here, the real theater begins. Not with costumes or makeup, but with trembling girls, straight-backed judges, and the weight of eternity stacked against your word. Inside the courtroom, the air is tense and chalky with cold dust and candle smoke. You imagine yourself seated at the back, bundled in wool, eyes wide. What you'd see wouldn't resemble anything like justice, not as we know it. It's part trial, part sermon, part exorcism. The afflicted girls tremble, wail, and collapse, claiming to see the spirits of the accused tormenting them. And every gasp, every swoon is taken as fact. Eyewitness testimony from a waking dream. The girls Ann Putnam Jr., Abigail Williams, Mercy Lewis are center stage. They weep, scream, contort. One claims an invisible bird pecked her. Another falls to the floor when the accused merely looks at her. You'd think it was a drama class gone rogue if it weren't so deadly. They're believed, these girls. Perhaps too believed. Historians still argue whether they were performing for power, suffering from mass hysteria, or caught in some strange social feedback loop where belief made the impossible feel real. The judge's men, like Samuel Sewall, John Haythorne, and William Stoughton, preside with grim certainty. They don't demand hard evidence. No fingerprints or bloodstains. Just behavior, reputation, and dreams. Spectral evidence, remember. If someone says your ghost whispered blasphemies in their ear, the burden falls on you to disprove it, which is tricky given that ghost whisper analysis hadn't yet become a formal science. You notice the rhythm of the trials isn't legal, it's theological. Defendants are asked if they believe in God, if they attend church, if they can recite the Lord's Prayer without stumbling. That's not just a memory test. A single missed word is considered evidence of guilt. You trip on "Thy kingdom come" and suddenly you're in chains. Meanwhile, the afflicted girls moan louder, feeding off each other's terror like moths swirling around a candle that's burning everything down. The line between reality and performance vanishes. You see it in the eyes of the audience. They want to believe. It makes things easier. Evil has a face now, your neighbors, your midwives, that lady who scowled at your dog. All of Salem's invisible problems finally have visible culprits. It's emotional closure delivered at the cost of someone else's life. You glance at a pale man seated alone, his lips pressed tight. That's Reverend Nicholas Noyes. He's the one who would later demand that a woman confess or be hanged. He'll eventually regret his role in all this, but not yet. Right now, he's convinced he's saving souls by snuffing them out, which is like saying you're fixing a leaky roof by burning down the house. The pace of the trials picks up. More and more names are scribbled into the court's record like a grocery list written in panic. Bridget Bishop, Rebecca Nurse, Martha Corey, George Burroughs. It's not about evidence anymore, it's about momentum. Fear has inertia, and no one wants to be the one who questions the system, lest they be accused next. Silence becomes strategy, and strategy becomes survival. You linger near the back of the room where parents clutch their children and neighbors avoid eye contact. Everyone knows that the wrong expression could be interpreted as sympathy for the accused. And sympathy, that's suspicious. Why would you defend a witch unless you were one? It's the kind of logic that spirals in on itself until it strangles you. Even the trials themselves are unequal. If you confess, you might be spared. Not freed, but spared, left to rot in jail, sometimes for months or even years. If you maintain your innocence, you're more likely to be executed. It's a horrifying paradox lie to live or tell the truth and die. Sarah Good, for instance, never confessed. Neither did Rebecca Nurse. They held on to their innocence. And for that, the noose waited patiently. There's a mythic weight to this courtroom. You sense it in every crack of the floorboards and every wavering candle flame. This isn't just about justice anymore. It's a public ritual, a moral purge, a way for the village to cleanse itself by designating human scapegoats. The courtroom becomes a confessional and a gallows in the same breath. And yet, there are moments when doubt flickers. A judge hesitates. A neighbor protests. A few brave souls stand up and say, "This is madness," but they're drowned out. For now. The crowd wants drama, not doubt. Fear, not fairness. You watch as another name is added to the growing list. Another soul sentenced, another life shattered, and all based on dreams, grudges, and the rustling of invisible wings. As you step back into the cold night, the wooden door of the courthouse creaks shut behind you, and you realize the most terrifying part of all the law isn't broken here. It's working exactly as it was built, to protect purity by eliminating dissent, to defend faith by punishing fear, to keep Salem holy no matter how many bodies it takes. The wind cuts sharper as you step away from the courthouse, carrying with it the lingering echoes of another guilty verdict. Somewhere behind you, someone sobs into their apron. You walk on boots crunching across frozen soil, past homes whose chimneys no longer smoke quite so cheerfully. Salem isn't just scared anymore, it's suspicious. There's a difference. Fear is what you feel when you're alone in the dark. Suspicion is what you feel when your neighbor lights a candle and you wonder if it's to summon Satan. The gossip spreads faster than frostbite. Church pews, taverns, even the marketplace, no space is safe from whispers. You hear it all. Someone's cow gave sour milk, and that surely means a witch touched it. Someone's baby cried too long at night, and that's another sign. A man had a bad dream and woke up certain that Goody Proctor tried to choke him with her ghost. It sounds absurd because it is, but you also can't laugh. Not here, not now. You pass by the home of Thomas Putnam, one of the most aggressive accusers. He's filed complaints against nearly 40 people. That's a lot of witch hunting for someone who isn't technically a witch hunter. Historians still argue whether Putnam's motives were religious, opportunistic, or just deeply personal. His family stood to gain land if certain neighbors were condemned. Coincidence, possibly. But in Salem, coincidences become convictions faster than you can say spectral evidence. The frenzy starts to resemble a game if games could ruin lives. Children mimic the afflicted girls in schoolyards. Housewives eye each other with narrowed glances over water barrels. Even dogs aren't safe. One is executed for allegedly being a familiar, a spirit helper for witches. Yes, a dog. A literal barking, tail-wagging, possibly good boy dog. Hung for demonic associations. You try not to picture it, but your brain does anyway. Sorry. There's no process for calming things down. No, sorry, we were wrong committee. No return to normalcy. Once someone is accused, they're tainted permanently. Even if they survive the trial, the stain lingers. You think of Mary Eastie, who was released from jail only to be rearrested days later when the girls claimed her spirit resumed its attacks. Talk about buyer's remorse. One of the strangest things about the whole mess is how fast it snowballs. What started with a handful of girls has turned into a community-wide psychodrama. You hear Reverend Parris giving a fire and brimstone sermon declaring that the devil walks among them. You are either with us or with the witches, he thunders. His words are part warning, part incantation. You almost expect the wooden rafters to catch fire in protest. The lines of logic begin to fold in on themselves. If someone denies being a witch too passionately, they're obviously guilty. If they're calm and resigned, that's guilt too. And if they try to run away, well, that's practically a confession. There's no good way out of this. The only winning move is not to play, but Salem's already decided everyone's in the game, whether they like it or not. Still, a few brave souls resist the tide. You hear stories about Giles Corey, the 81-year-old man who refuses to enter a plea. He knows the system is rigged. Pleading guilty means he's a liar. Pleading innocent still means trial, so he stays silent. The court retaliates with pressing a torturous practice involving heavy stones. For 2 days, he lies in the dirt, crushed bit by bit, reportedly muttering just one phrase, "More weight." He wins in a grim way. By never confessing, his land remains in his family, but it costs him everything else. Then there's John Proctor. Remember him. He sees the madness for what it is. A rational man in an irrational time. He challenges the girls, questions the court, and shockingly speaks out in favor of due process. That earns him an accusation. His pregnant wife Elizabeth is accused too, though her execution is delayed until she gives birth. You realize that honesty, once considered a virtue, is now a liability. There's a fatigue setting in across Salem. Even the judges seem weary, their decisions increasingly mechanical. But the girls keep going, their performances more elaborate than ever. Some claim they see ghosts of past victims floating in the rafters. Others writhe as if snakes are coiling around their legs. It would be almost theatrical if it weren't also deadly. You pass by the jail, a damp stone structure that smells like mildew, sweat, and despair. Inside, the accused huddle together, praying for deliverance or just a moment of silence. Conditions are terrible. Some fall sick, others starve. If you can't pay your own jail fees, yes, really, you're chained until someone bails you out. You glance at the barred windows and feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. As twilight sets in, you realize that Salem isn't just a town anymore, it's a warning, a parable written in ash and rope. The difference between order and hysteria, between justice and vengeance, turns out to be thinner than a spider's thread. And in 1692, that thread snapped. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, unsure if it's the cold or the truth that's making your teeth chatter. You wake to the sound of bells, church bells, not celebratory ones. They toll like a countdown, a grim metronome pacing the hours of a hanging day. You follow the mournful sound through the mist that hangs low over the fields, wrapping Salem in a soft white hush that feels more like a shroud than a fog. It's execution day, and the towns come out in full force. There are no cheers, just the quiet pressure of eyes that can't look away. Gallows Hill isn't marked on a map, but you find it easily. It's the high ground just beyond the village where the trees thin out and the earth slopes upward like it's reaching for something. You trudge toward it with the crowd, your feet slipping in the damp grass. It's a strangely quiet pilgrimage, no shouting, no celebration, just murmured prayers and the occasional sniffle. A town walking together toward death as though it's a shared appointment. At the crest, the gallows stands like a skeletal finger silhouetted against a bleached sky. There's something oddly fragile about it, just wood and rope. Nothing fancy, but the power it holds is massive. You can smell the pine freshly cut, hear the creak of the beams, feel your stomach twist as the condemned are led up the hill bound but walking on their own. That part's important, witches don't run. Today, 5 people will die. Bridget Bishop was the first to go months earlier, and now the rhythm is regular. Rebecca Nurse is among this group, gray-haired, frail, devout. She's not what anyone pictures when they hear the word witch. But here she is, stepping toward the noose with her head held high. You almost expect the ground to open up and protest. John Proctor is there too, jaw set like stone. He looks out over the crowd, not pleading, not cursing, just seeing. You wonder what goes through someone's mind in these last moments. Anger, regret, or maybe just the steady, numbing shock of everything collapsing at once. A few in the crowd weep, but no one stops it. Stopping would mean questioning the court. And questioning the court, that's practically witchcraft itself. The executioner works quickly. There's no speech, no fanfare. The ropes do their work in silence, and the crowd flinches in unison as the trapdoors open. The bodies sway in the breeze, and for a moment, everyone holds their breath. It's like even the wind knows it should show respect. Or maybe it's just stunned by the madness of it all. One woman in the crowd collapses, her face buried in her hands. Another clutches a child to her chest. You hear someone whisper, "God have mercy," and wonder who they're talking about, the hanged, or the rest of you still standing here complicit by proximity. It's easy to say you'd speak up, harder when the rope is already swinging. You learn that the executed aren't allowed proper burials. Their bodies are taken down under cover of night, carted off to shallow graves near the base of the hill, away from consecrated ground. Witches, after all, don't deserve hallowed earth. Families aren't permitted to reclaim the dead, but some try anyway, sneaking out at night, digging with bare hands, whispering prayers through tears. You can almost hear the dirt scraping beneath their fingernails. Historians still argue whether these executions had any broader support or were simply tolerated by a fearful few. Some claim the townsfolk genuinely believed in the trials. Others think they were swept up by momentum and fear. Most likely a mixture. Fear's funny like that. It doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like passivity. Sometimes it looks like silence. You pass a row of wagons heading back toward town, the drivers all staring straight ahead. The hangings are over for now, but the scent lingers. Smoke, sweat, something darker. Gallows Hill will eventually become just another patch of grass. No monument, no plaque for years to come. People won't talk about it much. Too painful. Too shameful. Memory, like fog, has a way of lifting, but sometimes only after it's done its damage. Back in Salem, people move slowly. The shops are open, but no one haggles. The church doors are wide, but the pews feel colder. It's as if the village is suspended in a kind of moral frost. You hear two women argue over whether one of the hanged might have actually been a witch. It's a quiet argument, barely more than a whisper, but it's enough to remind you that the fear hasn't left. It's just gone quiet. As night falls, you glance up at the stars and wonder what they make of all this. Do they see a town purging evil, or a town devouring itself? Maybe both. You lie back in the grass and listen to the breeze move through the trees. It's the same sound you heard up on the hill, only now there are names attached to it. You close your eyes, and in the silence between gusts, you think of Rebecca Nurse's final words, "I am as innocent as the child unborn." They echo across time, clear and heartbreaking. The stars don't answer, but they seem to blink slower tonight, like they, too, are unsure what comes next. You wake the next morning to a strange kind of stillness. It's not peace, just the airless pause after something terrible. Salem seems quieter, like a playhouse, after the curtains dropped. People still walk the streets, but their eyes dart and their conversations are clipped. The fear is still here, but it's no longer screaming. It's whispering. You can feel it in the way the doors shut just a bit faster, the way the windows stay shuttered even when the sun is high. You pass the meeting house and see the magistrates arriving again, robes fluttering like black wings. The trials haven't stopped. If anything, they've become more organized. The process now has its own grim efficiency. Witnesses are called, affidavits read, and the girls give their now familiar performances, convulsions, cries, pointing to invisible phantoms with wide, terrified eyes. You'd think people might have started to question them, but no. They're still treated like divine instruments, which is ironic considering how many people think they're channeling the devil. The phrase spectral evidence is still the star of the show. It's the idea that a witch can send her spirit to harm someone while her body sleeps safely elsewhere. You can't see the spirit. You just have to take the afflicted person's word for it. It's like testifying against an invisible man whose only crime is appearing in your dream. You imagine trying that in traffic court. Your Honor, the ghost of my neighbor haunted my horse and made it crash into a tree. Probably wouldn't fly. But in Salem, it earns you a death sentence. Historians still argue whether the judges truly believed in spectral evidence or simply used it as a tool to maintain control. Some say it was desperation, they had no physical proof and needed something. Others think it was pride. Once you start hanging people based on dreams, backing down becomes embarrassing. No one likes admitting they bet on the wrong ghost. You wander past the jail again. It's fuller now, over 150 people accused and imprisoned. The cells are so crowded that prisoners lie on the cold stone floor, sharing fleas, stale bread, and whispered prayers. The smell wafts out into the street like a warning. No one lingers nearby. You glance inside and spot a young boy, barely 10, accused and locked away. His crime being the son of Sarah Good, one of the first women hanged. Guilt by relation. You think of your own family and your stomach knots. At night, you overhear debates in the taverns. Quiet ones cautious. Some folks are starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the girls are exaggerating, or lying, or possessed by something other than spirits. But to say that out loud is risky. You remember what happened to John Proctor. Logic doesn't buy you leniency here. It buys you a rope. One of the most surreal elements is how business continues as usual. Bread still bakes. Cows still moo. Marriages happen. It's as if the town is juggling two realities, one where life carries on, and one where a supernatural horror show plays in the courtroom daily. You spot a wedding procession on your walk back, the bride dressed in pale linen. She smiles, but it doesn't reach her eyes, probably wondering if her bouquet is cursed. You notice how the afflicted girls start to divide the town literally. Their accusations follow old grudges, property disputes, inheritance battles. Who didn't return borrowed flour? You watch as the web widens and suspicion becomes an all-purpose weapon. The Putnams, you recall, seem especially good at playing this game. Historians point out how many of their enemies end up accused. It's witch hunting meets Family Feud, a Salem-style reality show. No one wins, but everyone watches. One day, as you pass the court, you hear a girl cry out and point at the ceiling. There she is, her spirits on the beam. The judge, unshaken, nods gravely and records it. No one looks up. No one sees anything. But that's not the point. You feel a strange urge to look just to be polite, like you're watching a mime and don't want to be rude. But there's nothing there, just rafters and dust. And maybe now something darker. You think of the clergy. Some, like Reverend Paris, double down, declaring that witches hide in plain sight, that every doubt is a test from God. But others, like Reverend Hale, begin to waver. Hale, once the loudest voice for rooting out evil, now walks with slower steps, his sermons quieter, more hesitant. He visits the jails and talks with the condemned. He starts to doubt the court. The transformation is subtle but powerful. You catch him once head bowed, asking God if he was wrong. The silence that follows is thunderous. Back in town, a new rumor starts to circulate. Some of the girls are naming each other. That's not supposed to happen. The hunters aren't supposed to become the hunted, but it does. And with it comes a ripple of uncertainty. If they can turn on one another, then no one is safe. You feel it in the way conversations shift, the way eyes glance sideways even more often. The paranoia has reached terminal velocity. At the end of the day, as you sit by the creek just outside town watching frogs skip across the water, you feel a strange calm, not because things are better, but because you understand now how far things can go when fear replaces reason. Salem isn't possessed, it's drowning in its own reflection, warped and wild-fed by superstition and silence. You wake before dawn, drawn by a faint commotion outside. A bell clangs somewhere in the distance, not the slow tolling of executions, but a faster, more frantic ring. You step outside and follow the sound through dew-wet grass and hushed streets. A horse gallops past its rider hunched low. Something's changed. You can feel it in the air, a tension different from fear. It's sharper, like doubt. When you reach the square, you see a crowd has already formed outside the courthouse. A piece of parchment flaps wildly on the wall, pinned by a knife. It's a petition signed by dozens of villagers declaring that the accused are innocent, that they've known these people for years, that they are no more witches than the cat that chases mice behind the bakery. It's bold, reckless even, but it's growing. People keep signing. You squint at the names and notice a few that surprise you. A shopkeeper, a carpenter, even a former accuser's cousin. That's when it hits you, the spell is breaking. Not the witch's spell, the one cast by fear and groupthink. Something inside the town is starting to push back. A small voice tired of being drowned out. And maybe it's finally loud enough to be heard. That same morning, a letter is sent to the governor of Massachusetts, William Phips. His own wife has now been whispered about in town. Nothing official yet, but rumors move faster than mail. And when they land on powerful ears, they spark consequences. You imagine Phips reading the letter over breakfast, raising one eyebrow as he reads about children pointing to specters, cats meowing in tongues, and the devil holding court in the woods. It probably made his tea go cold. Historians still argue whether Governor Phipps acted out of outrage, self-preservation, or political calculation. Whatever the case, his response is swift. He puts a stop to the use of spectral evidence just like that. One pen stroke, and the most absurd part of the entire ordeal is suddenly inadmissible. You almost expect a cheer to erupt in the village, but there's only stunned silence, like everyone's waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding." The girls continue their fits, but now they hit different. There's less awe, more side-eye. Someone scoffs during one of Abigail Williams' courtroom performances, and it spreads like a cough in a quiet church. One by one, people begin questioning what they've been watching. How did no one notice the melodrama, the repetition, the choreography? It's like someone finally opened the curtains on a long-running, low-budget horror play. And then comes the big one. Increase Mather, a powerful clergyman and father of Cotton Mather, publishes a statement. In it, he says it's better for 10 guilty witches to go free than for one innocent person to hang. Revolutionary stuff for Salem. It's the kind of logic that should have been obvious from the start. But in a town on fire, reason feels like a rainstorm slow to arrive, but deeply refreshing when it does. You walk through town and feel the shift. The fear is still there, but it's been joined by embarrassment. A woman wraps her shawl tighter as she passes the courthouse. A merchant removes a Witch Watch flyer from his window. Children no longer whisper specter as a joke. The tide is turning not with a bang, but with a blush. Denial wears a quieter face than outrage. The jail begins to empty. Slowly, reluctantly. Some prisoners are released. Some simply wait for trials that never come. The judges themselves begin to fade from public view, slipping away with their powdered wigs and stained ledgers. No one wants to be the last one defending a nightmare. You watch as one magistrate hurries out of town in a creaky wagon, his eyes fixed on the road like it owes him an apology. And the girls, they don't vanish. They just stop. No final confession, no dramatic exit. Just silence, like a song cut mid-note. They return to their homes, to awkward family dinners and sideways glances in the market. No formal punishment, no real accountability. That's the thing about hysteria. When it ends, no one wants to talk about who started it. You visit the meeting house one last time and see the empty benches where the judges once sat. Dust gathers in the corners. A loose shingle claps softly on the roof. You sit in the front row and listen. For once, there's no shouting, no accusations, just the wind. It almost sounds like forgiveness, or maybe just relief. You think back to the first signs, the odd behavior, the sudden fits, the finger-pointing, how quickly it all spiraled into gallows and grave digging. It's not just the supernatural that's frightening. It's how fast a community can unravel when fear gets a foothold, when belief outruns logic, when silence becomes survival. A man beside you mutters, "Never again." It's well-intentioned, but you've seen enough history to know better. Salem won't be the last. Fear is too easy. Scapegoats too convenient. Still, something has shifted here. A lesson, maybe. Not loud, but real. You hope someone writes it down. As you walk home under a sky turning gold with the setting sun, the town seems smaller than before. Or maybe you're just seeing it more clearly now. The fog has lifted. The gallows are empty. The silence for once feels clean. You wake to birdsong, the first honest one you've heard in a while. Not the nervous flutter of wings disturbed by whispers, but the clear, unconcerned chirp of something finally undisturbed. The hysteria has cracked, but it hasn't disappeared. Salem is still haunted, but now not by witches, by memory. Regret is thicker than fog in the streets. People go about their business with lowered eyes as though the trees might be watching, or worse, remembering. The trials haven't officially ended yet, but they're limping to a stop. No new accusations, no fresh arrests. The machinery that once hummed with paranoid efficiency now squeaks in protest. Judges hesitate, witnesses fumble, even the afflicted girls look bored. The town is tired. You can see it in their shoulders. You feel it in your own bones. Salem wants out of this fever dream, but the waking up part is harder than it sounds. You pass the jail again. Fewer shadows behind the bars now. One of the guards lounges outside, carving something into wood. You peer over his shoulder and see he's whittling a tiny noose. He smirks when he notices your glance, then shrugs. "Habit," he mutters. Dark humor, but it's all anyone has left. The horror has gone stale, and all that remains is the strange, sad aftertaste. The families of the accused begin filing petitions to clear names, not just out of pride, but out of necessity. Property seized, reputation shattered. A widow can't claim her husband's farm if he died a confessed witch. A child can't inherit land from a mother hanged for sorcery. So the process of legal resurrection begins. Names must be undamned. It's not glamorous. It's paperwork. Long, dull, complicated paperwork. But it's the closest thing to justice Salem can offer. One family, the Coreys, make a special effort. You remember Giles Corey, the one pressed to death under heavy stones. His final words still echo through town. More weight. A defiant whisper beneath the crushing absurdity of it all. His wife, Martha, had also been accused and hanged. Their children push hard to reclaim what little dignity history will allow. You pass their farm and see it tilled again, the soil stubborn but workable. Life creeps back in, even where blood once pooled. There's a strange paradox in the air. No one wants to talk about what happened, but no one can stop talking about it either. People whisper in corners carefully, not about devils or omens now, but about shame. Who said what? Who accused whom? Who watched and said nothing? You overhear someone say, "It could have been me." And that's the real curse, isn't it? Not witchcraft, but the knowledge that fear made monsters of ordinary folks. Historians still argue whether the end of the trials was truly a moral awakening or just exhaustion. Did Salem grow wiser, or did it just run out of steam? Was it conscience or convenience? The truth likely lives somewhere in the gray, right alongside the truth about witches, ghosts, and what people are capable of when pushed. In Boston, the Puritan leadership scrambles to patch up the image of their faith. Pamphlets are printed, sermons preached. A public fast is declared a sort of spiritual apology. You attend one sitting in the pew as the minister speaks of sorrow, of humility, of lessons learned. It feels sincere. Mostly, you see tears, but also yawns, because contrition, like witch trials, has its performance side too. A fringe pamphlet floats through town one morning. It claims the entire witch panic was fueled by spoiled rye. Ergot fungus, it says, can cause hallucinations and twitching fits. Makes sense in a weirdly modern way. You chuckle at the idea of the whole ordeal starting with a bad sandwich. Most people dismiss it, but it catches on with some, especially those who need a neat explanation for all the mess. Better to blame bread than the soul. You notice a slow return of music in Salem, a fiddle at the edge of the market, a girl humming while picking berries. Little things, but important ones. Joy makes a cautious comeback. You realize how quiet things had become, how long the laughter was gone. You wonder if some people forgot how to laugh entirely. At the edge of town, the trees that once served as gallows creak in the wind. People still avoid that part of the woods. Not because of ghosts, though a few swear they've seen shapes there, but because it reminds them of what they believed, what they did, what they let happen. The trees don't need to whisper. The town does it for them. You sit by the creek again as twilight drips slowly into the water. The same creek where you once watched frogs hop and thought about guilt. It's quieter now, more peaceful, but also lonelier. You've seen the worst parts of Salem. It's fear, it's rage, it's silence. But you've also seen the tiny shoots of something better, something honest, maybe even hopeful. A young couple walks by hand in hand. You hear the girl murmur, "Do you think it'll happen again?" Her partner squeezes her hand tighter. "Not here," he says, but you can hear the unsaid part in his voice. Somewhere maybe, someday. All it takes is fear and a match. You stir before sunrise again, but this morning the air feels different. Not warmer, not softer, but less heavy. Like something invisible has finally lifted off the rooftops of Salem. The windows open wider now. The shutters don't creak quite as nervously. It's not joy exactly. It's not forgiveness either. It's simply the first signs of breathing after months of holding one's breath. You walk through the town square and find it almost, dare you say, ordinary. Someone is selling bread. Someone else is mending a wagon wheel. For the first time in weeks, there's more talk about harvests than hauntings. But just beneath that surface, you still feel the tension. It's in the way eyes flick the way greetings hover at the edge of awkwardness. The trials are over in practice, but their echo lingers. Reverend Samuel Parris still gives sermons at the meeting house, though attendance has dropped. People remember his role in the panic, how he fanned the flames from the pulpit with phrases like Satan's servants among us. Now he preaches about healing, about unity, about mercy. You imagine even he doesn't believe all of it. His voice cracks on the word forgiveness, as if it's stuck in his throat. Some call for his resignation. Others defend him, saying he was just doing his job. Historians still argue whether Paris truly believed in the witchcraft he condemned or simply saw an opportunity to bolster his fading authority. Whatever his motive, his name will be linked with this moment forever. He becomes a cautionary tale in future sermons, though not always for the reasons he intended. You sit in on one of his services tucked away in the back pew. The room smells like old wood and tallow. Paris speaks slowly, avoiding the word witch altogether. He tells the congregation that darkness still walks among them, but this time it's doubt not devils. You glance around, some nod, some cross their arms, some stare straight ahead, unmoved. The spell is broken, but the repair is messy. And then there are the judges. Chief among them, William Stoughton. Unlike Paris, he offers no apology. He maintains the trials were righteous, that those hanged were guilty, that the court did nothing wrong. It's almost impressive in a grim way, his total commitment to the role of moral certainty. He'll go on to have a long political career. No gallows ever touch him. You hear murmurs of other towns watching Salem closely and not admiringly. Across Massachusetts, people begin rethinking how courts should handle accusations. Some places outlaw spectral evidence entirely. Others start putting tighter rules around testimonies, especially those involving dreams or invisible injuries. It's not exactly reform, more like damage control. Still, it marks a shift, a start. You pass the jail again, nearly empty now. A few stragglers remain awaiting final paperwork. Some have nowhere else to go. Their homes seized, their families gone. You catch sight of one woman seated on the ground, turning a small stone in her hand over and over. She doesn't speak, doesn't look up. But the rhythm of the stone against her palm says more than words could. She's free now. Technically. But where do you go after you've been called a witch? You stop by a tavern that's become a new center of town gossip. Inside, the talk has shifted to the weather taxes and inevitably the question of blame. Who's responsible? The girls, the judges, the devil. A man at the bar mutters that it's the women's fault, and someone across the room throws a chunk of bread at his head. It's not much, but it's something. Outside, the cemetery remains quiet. Small, unmarked plots along the edge of the forest. No crosses, no names. The hanged weren't given proper burials after all. But at night, you've seen candles placed near the trees, quiet vigils, apologies written in wax. Maybe someday those names will be carved into stone, but not yet. Not while the town still pretends it wasn't looking when the ropes were tied. The strangest part is that the afflicted girls, the ones whose fits started everything, fade from view. Some marry, some move away. One is rumored to have joined a convent. They are not punished. Not really. Salem doesn't know how to reconcile their actions. Were they victims? Were they liars? Were they just kids swept up in something too big to control? You may never know. And maybe that's the point. You climb Gallows Hill one last time. The ground is still uneven, still unmarked. The trees sway in the wind like they've never forgotten. You sit at the top where the hangings happened. The view is wide. You can see the whole village from here. It looks peaceful now, but you know better. The roots of fear are deep. They twist beneath the soil, waiting. And yet Salem doesn't end in fire. It ends in silence, in lessons unspoken, in eyes that glance away. You think of all the stories that won't be told, the truths buried alongside the innocent, the justice that never arrived, but also of the moments where someone stood up, signed their name, lit a candle. The sun sets slowly over the village, painting the rooftops in gold. You close your eyes and let the breeze find you. It carries no voices now, just the rustle of leaves and the low hum of a town beginning very slowly to heal. You wake beneath soft gray skies, the kind that don't threaten rain, but don't promise warmth either. The kind of sky that just is like the village beneath it, quiet, resigned, and learning to live with itself. Salem's trying to move on. You can feel it in the rhythms, the hammering of a new roof, the faint smell of bread rising from a brick oven, the cautious way people say hello again. They're rebuilding not just homes, but trust. It's slower than stonework. You walk to the edge of the village and pass the parsonage of Reverend Paris. The shutters are closed, but you hear voices inside muffled tents. His household has never really recovered. Abigail Williams, his niece and one of the first accusers, vanished months ago. Historians still argue where she went. New York, Boston, perhaps even the Caribbean. Some say she changed her name. Others say she lived with the guilt. But here in Salem, she's a ghost no one wants to see. Betty Paris, the Reverend's daughter, never fully returned to herself either. You're told she was sent away to live with relatives. Perhaps she grew up normal, married, had children, or maybe she always felt the eyes of the village following her. It's hard to grow out of something that once turned you into an oracle, especially when your words helped fill graves. You sit on a fallen log near the Putnam property. Ann Putnam Jr., another central accuser, is still here. She lives with her parents, but she's quieter now. Not silent, but changed. One day in 1706, years from now, she will stand in church and confess. Publicly, tearfully, she will say she was deceived by Satan, that her accusations were wrong, that innocent blood lies on her soul. It won't undo what happened, but it will be the closest thing to closure Salem ever gets. And yet not all of the girls apologize. Most simply disappear into their adult lives. Some marry into good families. Some stay single. None are punished. And why would they be? Salem wasn't built to prosecute the accusers, only the accused. You think of them as you walk past the old courthouse, now dark and quiet. The stage is empty, the props stored away, but the memory of their performances still lingers in every echo. You overhear a conversation at the well, two women whispering about the trials as if they were last week. Do you think it could happen again? One asks. The other shrugs. It never stopped. It's a chilling thought. You realize she's not talking about witches, but about fear. About the speed with which people turn on each other. About how thin the line is between a town and a mob. There are by now efforts to make amends. Small ones. Petitions granted. Property returned. Names cleared. But not all families receive justice. Some descendants are left to carry the stain for generations. Others refuse to speak of it. You pass a woman in the market who claims her great-aunt was hanged. Her face is proud, but her voice is quiet, like she's still unsure if it's safe to tell the truth. You visit the library, one of the few buildings in Salem that feels forward-looking. Inside, a young man is copying court transcripts by hand, preserving them. He doesn't flinch at the details. They need to be remembered, he says. Even the ugly parts. You admire his resolve. In a world that wants to forget, the act of remembering becomes a kind of resistance. That night, you dream of the hanging tree again. Only this time it's covered in blossoms. The branches are heavy with white flowers, soft as breath. You wake before dawn and walk there just to see. And while the real tree bears no flowers, you notice someone has left a small stone at its base, then another, then several. A quiet ritual has begun. Not official, not organized, just people one by one leaving something behind. A pebble, a ribbon, a prayer. Not for witches, but for neighbors. For loved ones. For the people who didn't survive the silence. Salem will never be the same. It can't be. Even as the town moves on, grows larger, welcomes new settlers, builds new roads, this chapter will follow it. A footnote, a scar, a warning. Future generations will point to it and say, this is what happens when fear is louder than truth. You hope they listen. And you, walking through the town that once turned shadows into rope, feel something shifting inside you too. You've seen what mass panic looks like, how it starts, how it grows. But you've also seen it end. Not with trumpets or banners, but with small acts of courage. With someone saying no. With someone placing a stone beneath a tree. The stars rise above Salem, soft and indifferent. You sit by the creek one last time and listen to the frogs sing. The water flows gently, like time trying to forgive itself. You close your eyes, and for the first time in a long while, sleep feels easy. You wake to a soft knock on a door that isn't yours, someone else's memory echoing in your ears. You're not sure if it's the wind or something older, but the sound lingers like unfinished business. Salem is quieter still, but the quiet no longer feels like silence. It feels like caution, like a town still holding its breath, not because it's terrified, but because it remembers what happened the last time it exhaled too loudly. You walk along the edge of the village where trees are reclaiming the land and fences sag from neglect. Nature doesn't care about trials. Grass grows over forgotten paths. Moss climbs up stones where people once gathered to accuse. Time erases things slowly, sometimes helpfully, sometimes cruelly. You wonder which this is. Probably both. In the distance, you see a young boy tossing pebbles into a creek. His mother stands nearby watching. You overhear their conversation. He asks, "What's a witch?" She hesitates. "Something people used to believe in," she says. He nods, satisfied. You wonder what she left out. The fear. The hangings. The fact that being different used to be deadly. Maybe she's saving that for when he's older. Maybe she's still trying to understand it herself. You find yourself near the property once owned by George Burroughs, the former minister who was hanged after being accused of being the leader of the witches. His story still stings. Burroughs wasn't even in Salem when the panic started. He'd moved to Maine. But old grudges die hard, and when his name was brought up, the court dragged him back. At his execution, he recited the Lord's Prayer flawlessly, something witches supposedly couldn't do. Witnesses were stunned. Some wept. It didn't matter. He was hanged anyway. The rope didn't care how well he prayed. Historians still argue why Burroughs was targeted. Was it theology? Old debt's power struggles? Likely a mix. His fate became one of the first cracks in the hysteria. People couldn't explain away his composure, his piety, his strength. His death planted doubt, quietly but permanently. You stop at the edge of his former land and imagine him standing tall on the gallows, whispering the Lord's words as the trap door creaked beneath him. There's a strange power in that moment. A man condemned still choosing dignity, not to prove innocence he'd already been condemned, but to reclaim something no judge could take. You wonder if the crowd that day knew what they were watching. A man dying, yes, but also something bigger, the beginning of the end of belief without question. You pass by a row of cottages where the Putnams once lived. The family has since fractured. Some left town, some try to forget, others cling tightly to their righteousness. Anne Putnam Jr., though still a girl during the trials, eventually becomes the only one of the accusers to offer public repentance. In 1706, she stands before her church and says the words, "No one else would I did it by delusion of the devil." It's the closest Salem gets to a confession, not just hers, but the town's. You wonder how the townsfolk heard those words. Did they forgive her, resent her? Did they replay the names she spoke in court and realize how many of their neighbors weren't sitting in the pews anymore? That's the thing about confessions, they never arrive early enough. They always show up long after the damage is done. You sit on a split-rail fence and watch as children play near a well. One pretends to cast spells, spinning in circles and shouting nonsense. The others laugh. In a different year, that might have been grounds for arrest. Now it's just a game. You're not sure whether to smile or cry. Maybe both. Progress is strange like that. Further down the road, you pass by the graves of townsfolk not accused of witchcraft, but changed by it. Parents who buried their children. Husbands who buried their wives. Friends who buried their trust. Some stones are marked, most are not. You kneel at one and brush off a pile of dead leaves. The name is nearly faded, but it's there. A reminder that history doesn't vanish. It just waits for someone to notice it again. You overhear an elderly man at the market say, "We lost more to fear than to witches." His companion replies, "That's because we never actually had witches." They both nod and go back to arguing about turnip prices. It's a simple exchange, but it sticks with you. A quiet acknowledgement of truth in the midst of everyday life. Salem doesn't shout anymore. It mutters. But sometimes muttering is enough. Night comes early again, as it often does in Massachusetts winters. You walk home beneath a sky dusted with stars. The moon hangs low, pale and unbothered. Somewhere nearby, someone sings a hymn. The sound drifts like smoke through bare branches, soft and off-key. You don't know the words, but it feels like a lullaby. Not to forget, but to rest. You reach the edge of the woods and pause. You remember the stories of witches gathering here, dancing, summoning, conjuring. You smile. The trees are just trees. The wind is just wind. The real danger never lived here in the woods. It lived in the meeting house, in the courtroom, in the mirror. You turn back toward town, the gravel crunching beneath your boots. The lights flicker in distant windows. Salem is quieter now, but never truly quiet. You wake to the distant clatter of hooves and wagon wheels on frozen ground. Another visitor to Salem, maybe. Another set of boots coming to stand on streets paved with apologies no one quite knows how to say. You draw your cloak tighter around your shoulders. The morning air is crisp with frost, but it's the memories that chill you deeper. You make your way toward the town's outer edge where the old gallows once stood. It's been dismantled, of course, burned, buried, quietly removed like a stain scrubbed from the edge of a fine rug. But people still don't plant there. No crops, no fences, no cottages. The land remembers even when people try to forget. You stop near the tree line and listen. It's silent now, but once it echoed with last breaths and the creak of rope. Back in town, the mood has turned from mourning to maintenance. People are repairing what they can: fences, relationships, reputations. You pass the house of Mary Bradbury, one of the few accused who survived. Too old and frail for jail, she was spared through intervention, but her name was never quite cleared in public. She lives quietly now, eyes low, smile thin. You hear her neighbors greet her politely, but the warmth is missing. Some stains don't wash out even when everyone agrees they should. Governor Phipps, the man who halted the madness, has returned to Boston. He'll never quite escape the shadow of the trials. His decision to stop the use of spectral evidence came late, but not too late. Historians still debate whether his motives were moral, political, or simply logistical. After all, a legal system run by dreams and fits isn't sustainable. You can't build courts on fog. Not for long. Phipps disbands the Court of Oyer and Terminer and replaces it with a more conventional legal body, one that requires actual evidence, witnesses who don't foam at the mouth, and no more ghost-related testimony. It's an improvement, but it's also a slow walk away from a fire he allowed to burn too long. He never publicly condemns the trials. He just moves on, like everyone else seems determined to do. You stop near the churchyard where Reverend Hale once walked with absolute confidence. You remember him, the eager minister who came to Salem to root out evil, only to realize too late that the evil wore no horns, just wigs and black robes. Hale changed. You watch him from a distance now, pacing slower, head bowed, shoulders heavier. He visits the families of the dead, speaks gently, apologizes more than most. It doesn't fix anything, but it matters. He's one of the few to admit he was wrong, openly, painfully. I came to do God's work, he says once during a sermon, but I forgot to listen to him. It's not exactly a headline, but in Salem it echoes louder than any accusation. You wonder how many others feel the same and say nothing. Maybe their shame is quieter. Maybe it doesn't know how to speak. You pass a child drawing in the dirt with a stick. You pause, noticing the shape of gallows, but then he scratches it out and draws a horse instead. Good choice. Even children carry the echoes here, and you're not sure if that's good or bad. Maybe it means they remember. Maybe it means they can change the story. The town begins drafting lists, names of those wrongly accused. It's a slow process, tangled in pride and legalities. Some resist saying the dead might still have been guilty. Others argue for full exoneration. It becomes a quiet civil war, fought in pamphlets and public meetings. The same fear that fueled the trials now fuels the denial. It's easier to call the trials a necessary mistake than to say your aunt was hanged for nothing. A petition finally reaches the Massachusetts General Court. It's filled with signatures from surviving family members demanding the state acknowledge its error. In 1702, the court declares the trials unlawful. Later, a day of fasting is declared a symbolic gesture of repentance. People attend. Some cry. Some sleep through it. Symbolism can only go so far, but it's a start. You hear that Reverend Noyes, who once demanded confessions from the scaffold, will eventually express regret. Or maybe he won't. Stories differ. Historians note a strange silence in his later sermons. He never mentions Salem, never says the word witch again, as if erasing it from his vocabulary will erase it from history. You'd like to believe he wept behind closed doors. But some men are better at moving forward than looking back. You wander into a tavern late in the evening and overhear a conversation between two younger men. They're laughing, not about the trials, but about politics, taxes, something mundane. One of them says, "At least we're not hanging people anymore." The other shrugs, only because there's no one left to blame. It's dark humor, but it's honest. Blame always finds someone. Salem just ran out of room. The moon rises behind the church steeple as you walk home. The stars are clear pinpricks in the black canvas overhead. You breathe deeply, tasting pine soot and something older. The town has changed. The danger has passed. But the memory will stay. Etched into the beams of the meeting house, the stones of the jail, and the silences between neighbors. You reach your doorstep and pause. Someone has left a single white flower on your windowsill. No note, no explanation, just a quiet symbol. Maybe forgiveness, maybe remembrance, maybe a reminder that even here, even now, there are still people trying to be kind. Morning in Salem again. The kind of morning where everything feels still, not with peace, but with pause, as if the village is collectively holding its breath, waiting to see what version of itself will emerge now that the fire's out. You step out and feel the chill through your boots. It's familiar, constant, unlike the people who have changed in ways they're only just beginning to notice. You wander past the blacksmith shop where hammer on iron echoes through the trees. The rhythm is steady, almost soothing, but even here the trials linger. The blacksmith's apprentice, whose aunt was hanged, works with eyes downcast, doesn't speak much, doesn't joke the way he used to. He's learning more than metalwork now. He's learning quiet. Further up the road, you spot a group of townsfolk gathered outside the town hall. They're reading aloud a formal statement from the Massachusetts General Court declaring the trials a mistake. Unlawful proceedings, it says. Strong words for strong damage. People nod. Some tear up. One man scoffs and spits in the dirt. Took him long enough, he mutters. He's not wrong. The statement goes further, naming names, acknowledging families promising compensation. Small sums, really coins, meant to fill a hole that can't be filled. Still, it's something. For some families, it's the first recognition that their grief was real. You watch a widow press the parchment to her chest and close her eyes. You wonder if it helps. Maybe not today, but maybe someday. Inside the town archives, clerks are carefully copying names onto clean paper. No more labels like witch or sorcerer, just names. Human again. The ink smells sharp, the parchment stiff. You trail a finger along the edge of a page, listing Giles Corey. Next to his name pressed to death, refused to plea, family awarded reparation. It's bureaucratic, dry, but in a way it's sacred. An undoing in ink. You step back out and see a child playing in the snow, building something. At first, it looks like a man, but then you realize it's a gallows. 2 sticks tied together. You freeze. But then the child knocks it over and starts a new shape. A house, a tree, a rabbit maybe. The difference between destruction and rebuilding can be a moment, a choice, a nudge. The community gathers again in the meeting house for a special day of prayer and fasting. Governor Phipps is absent, but Reverend Hale is there. So is Reverend Noyes, though he doesn't speak. Hale leads the prayer. He doesn't sermonize, just kneels with the others. The floor creaks beneath so much weight of bodies of memory. You look around. The same benches that once hosted accusations now host apology. Historians still argue whether this moment, this day of fasting, was genuine or performative. Was it heartfelt atonement or a bid to save face? The truth may be both. You feel sincerity in some faces, shame in others. A woman sobs quietly near the front. A young man whose mother had once accused a neighbor keeps his head down the entire time. You see one child drawing in the dust with his finger over and over, forgive. Afterward, people linger, they talk, share food. Someone starts a song, an old hymn. Others join in hesitantly, at first then stronger. It's not a celebration, not quite. More like an exhale, a long, slow release of something that's been held too tightly for too long. You sit outside afterward, letting the music wash over you. Later that evening, the town constable walks through the streets, collecting old trial records. Not to burn them, those days are done, but to store them properly. We're not forgetting, he says, just preserving. He looks tired, but resolute, like someone who's learned the difference between justice and judgment. You visit a woman named Elizabeth. Her husband, John Proctor, was executed. She was spared only because she was pregnant. She's never remarried. She keeps to herself. But when you knock gently on her door, she opens it, offers you tea, talks softly, tells you John's last words were not bitter, but calm. I am no saint, he said, but I am not what they say. She shows you a small wooden carving he made for their child, unfinished. A toy horse. He never liked horses, she says, smiling faintly. But he wanted to make one just once before. Her voice trails off. You let the silence fill the room because that's what it needs. Not words, just space. You leave her home and walk through the darkening streets, lantern swinging in hand. The cold bites, but it feels normal now. Familiar. The kind of discomfort you can live with. You pass Gallows Hill quiet again. No stones, no ropes, no crowds. Just earth. Breathing, waiting. You stand there for a while, not thinking, just being. In the distance, a dog barks. A child laughs. A bell chimes. All ordinary things. All once impossible in the heat of hysteria. But now they return. Slowly, unevenly, but surely. You look up at the stars and feel the weight of every name, every mistake, every forgiveness, unspoken but felt. And you walk home one quiet step at a time. You wake to find a gentle snow drifting down fat, soft flakes that make no sound when they land. The rooftops are dusted in white, and the paths are faint beneath a new layer of winter. Salem wears the snow like a veil, and beneath it, the village seems smaller. Quieter. You walk the streets slowly, watching your breath curl out in little clouds as if your own body's trying to whisper something too. Down by the market, someone has carved initials into the snow on a barrel lid. RN Rebecca Nurse. Someone remembers. It's not graffiti, not defiance, just a quiet offering. A nod to the past without demanding a speech. That's how Salem remembers best now. Soft gestures, understatements. Things left half said out of both respect and discomfort. You pass a group of older men near the meeting house discussing land boundaries. You catch one of them, Joseph, mention a plot that used to belong to George Burroughs. Should go back to the family, he says. The others nod. That's new. A year ago, they were arguing about whether Burroughs summoned storms from the treetops. Now they're talking restitution. You wonder how deep the change really runs. In the church records, you find entries struck through with careful lines, not erased, but amended. Which changed to wrongly accused, margins filled with cramped writing, notes of regret. The paper is yellowing, the ink blotted. You feel like you're looking at scars, still visible, but healing. And then there's the children, always the first to adapt and the last to be asked what they remember. You watch them build snow mounds where once they traced gallows. They throw snowballs, not names. But you know they've heard the stories. Every game now includes a specter or a curse, but the tone is different. Less fear, more play. Like they're rewriting the rules. You pass the jail again. Empty, of course, but still standing. A few bricks have cracked. Vines curl up one corner. No one's in a rush to tear it down. It's a reminder, a warning. Some say it should be burned, others that it should stand forever. For now, it just exists like a bruise that stopped hurting, but hasn't quite faded. In town, a teacher reads aloud from Increase Mather's sermon on the trials. It is better that 10 suspected witches should escape than that one innocent person should be condemned. The class is silent. One boy raises his hand and asks, "Did anyone apologize to the ones they hanged?" The teacher pauses, not for lack of an answer, but because sometimes the truth makes your throat tighten. You stop by the graveyard where a new stone has been added, not for the hanged, but near them. It reads simply, "Here we remember those whose names were taken." It's unadorned. No dates. No explanation. Just acknowledgement. You see someone kneeling there, not crying, just sitting. Their breath rises in steady puffs, and you don't interrupt. Historians still debate what lesson Salem left behind. Was it about mass hysteria, misused religion, the dangers of unchecked authority? The records say one thing, the people another, but in the snow-covered stillness of the town, it seems like the most enduring lesson is simpler fear, when left to fester, grows teeth. And those teeth don't ask questions before they bite. You overhear two women at the bakery discussing someone in another town accused of speaking to spirits. Let's hope they've learned something, one says. The other nods. We hadn't. It's the closest thing to a confession you've heard all week. Maybe it's enough. In the evening, lanterns flicker in windows again. Not from fear this time, but from habit. Light against the cold. You sit near one and watch the snow fall heavier now. The sky is bruised purple. You think of Giles Corey of Tituba, of the girls who screamed and the ones who stayed silent, of who got remembered and who was allowed to forget. You close your eyes and listen to the snow pile softly on rooftops. Salem, it seems, is learning to live with what it did not, by pretending it didn't happen, but by letting it settle like snow, layer by layer, quietly, until the shape of it becomes part of the landscape, not erased, just absorbed. You wake to the gentle crack of ice melting in the eaves. Sunlight glints through frost-laced windows, and for the first time in what feels like forever, there's no fog in the air, no mist on the ground, no doubt between neighbors. It's still Salem, still scarred and stained, but something is shifting. The fear no longer hangs like smoke. It's drifting away little by little like breath on a warming wind. You walk to the square, where a new notice has been posted. The General Court is calling for a formal day of remembrance, not fasting, not shame, just remembering. It's different this time. It feels less like punishment, more like reflection. A small group gathers to read it. No speeches, just nods. One woman holds her husband's hand a little tighter. Someone starts humming a hymn, low, tuneless, familiar. You make your way to the old schoolhouse where today's lesson is unlike any other. The teacher stands before her small group of students and reads names. Rebecca Nurse, John Proctor, Martha Corey. She reads them slowly, carefully, with space between each one. The children are quiet. One girl raises her hand and asks, why didn't anyone stop it? The teacher pauses. Then she says, some tried, but most were too afraid. And just like that, the truth sits in the room, like a guest no one invited, but everyone recognizes. Historians still argue how Salem should be remembered, a failure of law, of religion, of culture. But as you walk past the houses, it's clear that Salem doesn't need a single story. It has hundreds. The midwife who vanished after her name was cleared. The boy who grew up afraid of his own shadow. The neighbor who now leaves bread on the doorstep of the family she once testified against. There are no perfect endings, just people still trying. Down by the river, the ice has begun to break. Thin cracks web across the surface. Water gurgles beneath. You toss in a pebble and watch it disappear with a quiet plunk. A child nearby copies you, then asks, do you think witches were ever real? You shrug. Maybe not the kind they feared. The child nods solemnly and tosses another stone. The answer seems to satisfy them more than it satisfies you. You sit with Elizabeth Proctor again. Her hands are worn from work, but steady. She shows you a quilt she's been sewing, each patch a different color, some dark, some light. It's not beautiful, she says, but it's warm. You understand what she means. Some things aren't meant to be pretty, just honest, durable, capable of holding the cold at bay. The church bell rings at noon, not for judgment, but for gathering. A new kind of gathering, no sermons, no trials, just people standing in a circle outside the meeting house, each holding a candle. One by one they step forward and speak a name. No accusations, just names. Soft, simple, and true. You watch Reverend Hale's lips move with the name George Burroughs. He doesn't flinch, just exhales. Even Reverend Paris appears older, quieter. He stands at the edge of the circle and listens. Doesn't speak, doesn't approach. But he's there, and maybe that's enough. He'll resign before the decade is out. Not for guilt, perhaps, but because the town no longer fears him. His voice, once so central, now echoes in an empty pew. You notice how the children play now without whispers. They build snow forts, not gallows. They chase each other, not shadows. The older ones still remember, but they carry it differently, like a bruise instead of a wound. It still aches, but it doesn't define them. Not anymore. The snow begins to melt in earnest. Little rivers of slush run down the roads. People sweep porches, shake out rugs, hang herbs in windows again. The smells of rosemary, sage, and smoke drift through the air, not in fear this time, but in ritual, in habit, in comfort. You overhear a man in the tavern telling a visitor, this town used to burn cold. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. The visitor just nods and sips his drink. In Salem, the cold is a metaphor now. It stands for something. Something everyone understands, but few want to explain out loud. As twilight settles, you walk the ridge above Gallows Hill. It's quiet. There always has been. You sit for a while, watching the rooftops below catch the fading light. The snow is patchy now. Brown grass peeks through. A raven lands nearby, hops once, and takes off again. You think about the names, the stories, the silences. You think about the ones who survived and the ones who were never believed. Then you think about today, about how it felt different, not fixed, not forgiven, but acknowledged. Salem may never heal completely, but healing isn't the same as erasing. It's living with the truth and still choosing to keep walking. You wake to a softer world. The air is warmer now, the kind that hints at spring without making promises. The icicles drip steadily from the eaves, forming tiny puddles in the ruts left by wagons. Salem is shifting once again, no longer haunted, just hushed. Like a room after a storm, like people brushing broken glass from the windowsills and finding somehow that they can see outside again. You stroll through the center of town past familiar buildings no longer charged with memory but touched by it. The meeting house, the jail, the parsonage. They stand as they did but carry a different weight now. No one points, no one speaks in hushed tones. But everyone knows. The buildings are like old scars, still there, still visible, but no longer painful to touch. Down by the river, the thaw has broken it open. Ducks swim lazily in the current, and children toss pebbles from the bank without looking over their shoulders. You catch snippets of conversation about planting times, about new babies, about rumors from Boston. Not a single word about witches. It's not that people have forgotten. It's that they're beginning to remember other things too. In the market, you pass by stalls bustling with cloth honey and soap. You spot a familiar face, Mercy Lewis, one of the afflicted girls. Older now, no longer twitching or pointing or crying out. She's buying thread, laughing with the woman selling it. You wonder if she remembers what she did, whether the guilt ever tugged at her sleeve. She looks up and meets your gaze for just a second. Then she turns away. Historians still debate what became of these girls. Some married and lived quietly. Some moved far away. Some stayed and endured the sideways glances. No trials were ever brought against them. No formal accountability. And yet you suspect they carry more weight than the courts ever could have imposed. There's no rope for regret, no gallows for grief. At the edge of the woods, you find a new signpost, hand-carved simple in memory of the wrongly condemned. Below it, a basket of wildflowers not yet wilted. You kneel and touch one, a yellow daffodil bright against the gray earth. Someone still remembers. Someone still cares enough to walk here and leave beauty where only sorrow once stood. Back in town, the meeting house hosts a reading. A new manuscript, someone's compiled testimonies, court records, journal fragments. The room is full, not with the angry crowds of old, but with listeners. Some close their eyes while others jot notes. A woman at the front reads in a calm voice. No drama, no raised tones, just facts and names. Always the names. You sit in the back pew and notice Reverend Hale again. His face is drawn thinner now, but his eyes are clear. He's scribbling in the margins of a worn leather notebook. Later, you glimpse a line he's written, "The sin was not witchcraft, but certainty." You think about that for a long time. There's a new girl in town, young, maybe 10. She asks her mother if witches are real. Her mother doesn't shush her, doesn't scold. She kneels down and says, "Witches not like that, no." Then adds, "But fear, yes." That's the part we need to watch. You smile. Progress doesn't always march. Sometimes it whispers. At sunset, you walk toward Gallows Hill. The sky behind it is gold and pale blue with clouds like brush strokes. A path winds gently up the slope, no longer beaten down by carts and boots, but softened by grass. Someone has placed a small wooden bench near the top. You sit there for a while, watching the rooftops below glow in the dying light. You wonder what those who were hanged would think if they saw this quiet, this remembering, this effort. You hope they'd see it not as too little too late, but as something. As people doing the best they can after doing their worst. Maybe they'd forgive, or maybe they'd simply nod and walk on. Night falls gently. The stars blink into view, and the trees rustle without menace. You lie back on the bench, the wood creaking under you, and listen. No shouting, no crying, no curses, just wind and the faint rustle of a world finally choosing gentleness. You close your eyes and whisper a name, any name, one of the forgotten ones, one of the innocent. You let it hang in the air like smoke, then fade away into the cool, clean night. You wake to the scent of turned soil and hearth smoke, familiar grounding smells that speak not of panic, but of routine. The season is shifting again, and so is Salem. Not dramatically, not loudly, but steadily, like a wound sealing from the inside out. The village no longer flinches at every creak in the rafters. The ghosts are still here, but they've gone quiet. Maybe they're listening, maybe they're waiting, or maybe they've finally been heard. You pass the burial ground just after dawn. A young man is placing a small wooden cross beside one of the older stones. He says nothing, doesn't notice you, just bows his head. No sermon, no performance, just memory in motion. You don't need to know the name. The act says enough. The governor's latest proclamation has arrived by courier, tattered by the wind, but intact. He writes that the remaining accused shall be legally exonerated. The last names cleared. Finally. It took years. Too many. But now, Salem has officially declared that no witches were ever found here. The irony, of course, is that none were ever truly searched for, only feared. People gather in the square to hear the reading. There's no applause. Just a few nods. A few tears. It's not triumph. It's relief. And perhaps a little disbelief. The same mouths that once cried witch now read from legal scrolls. You wonder how many of them realize their voices once sentenced friends to die, or if that knowledge has simply sunk into their bones too deep for words. You stop by a small farmhouse where an older woman named Ruth lives alone. Once a servant in the Putnam household, she saw everything. She says little now, but when she does speak, it's deliberate. She tells you the girls believed at first, but then it turned into something else, something harder to control. We were scared, she says, staring into her tea. But fear don't ask permission before it spreads. You walk through the woods and find Tituba's old path, the one she used when gathering herbs. It's overgrown now, but traces remain. Some believe she went south after her release. Some say she died, poor alone, forgotten. But others say she became a healer again. Somewhere else, somewhere far from Salem. You find yourself hoping that version is true, that she made tea for children with fevers and never heard the word witch again. You overhear a visitor in town, a scholar from Boston, interviewing locals for a book. He asks one man, "Why do you think it happened?" The man shrugs. Too much winter, too little bread, too many sermons. It's funny, but it's not. Because it might be true. Sometimes the matches that light the world on fire are the smallest ones. Historians still disagree on the exact cause. Was it political, economic, gendered panic, religious fervor? It's likely a knot of all of them tangled tight. And Salem Blessed pulled on the wrong thread. But what matters now isn't what lit the match. It's what we do with the ash. The schoolhouse has reopened with new lessons. Children now learn about the trials as history, not rumor. They read names, not accusations. They memorize laws, not curses. You watch a boy raise his hand and ask if this happened once, could it happen again? The teacher doesn't flinch. She simply says, yes. That's why we remember. And that more than any monument feels like progress. Down the road, you pass a small shop that now sells candles with the names of the exonerated carved into the wax. Some people light them on their mantles. Others keep them unlit, untouched. Either way, it's an act of reverence, a modern ritual born of old mistakes. The town begins a yearly walk, quiet, respectful, from the old jail to Gallows Hill. It's not a parade. There's no music, just footsteps. Some wear ribbons with names written on them. Others carry stones. One man simply walks with his hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. No one speaks unless they need to. That night, you attend a small gathering at the edge of the village. A fire burns low. Tea is passed around. Stories are told not just of the trials, but of those who resisted, who refused to accuse, who spoke up even when the wind was against them. They are not as well remembered, but they are the reason anything survived at all. You listen to one woman recall her grandfather who once testified on behalf of Rebecca Nurse. He said her prayers were better than his. She smiles. The court didn't care. But I do. You nod. Because that's how history really moves, not with declarations, but with small remembrances. Personal ones, quiet ones, like this. Before you leave, someone hands you a folded scrap of parchment. You open it and read, "We cannot change what we were, but we choose what we become." It's unsigned. You fold it carefully and tuck it in your coat. Later, you stand alone at the top of Gallows Hill. The stars above are bright, scattered quiet. You say a name aloud, just one. No audience, no crowd, just you and the night. And it feels, somehow, like enough. You wake to birdsong, clear and warm, as though the trees themselves have decided it's time for new things to grow. The air smells different this morning, less like soot, more like soil. You walk the streets of Salem one last time. They're familiar now, no longer heavy with dread, but softened by time and by effort. Something resembling peace hums beneath each passing wagon wheel, each doorway open without hesitation. You pass a garden where two women are planting onions. One hums a tune, the other says, "Funny thing about seeds, they don't care what happened last year." They laugh, but it lands heavy in your chest. There's a lesson in that, you think, as you walk on. Something about roots and change, and how growth begins with what's buried. Today is the official day of remembrance. Not a holiday, not a fast, something quieter. Just a walk, a candle, a list of names read slowly by townsfolk standing beneath budding trees. You arrive at the square just in time to hear the first name, Bridget Bishop. The voice reading it doesn't shake. It doesn't need to. The silence around it does all the work. There's no grand ceremony, just standing, listening, witnessing. Some cry, some just breathe deeper. You watch children hold hands with their parents. One boy lights a candle and then sets it gently in a hollowed-out turnip carved like a lantern. It flickers as the wind passes but doesn't go out. Neither do the others. As the names continue, George Burroughs, Martha Carrier, Sarah Good, you see people nod. Some close their eyes. You recognize descendants in the crowd, not from features, but from posture. The way some of them carry their shoulders, like they're still carrying something. Like they've inherited silence and are now learning how to speak again. When the reading ends, no one claps, no one cheers, but no one leaves immediately either. They linger. They lean on each other. They pour cider and pass fresh bread and tell stories not about the trials, but about the people who survived them. About their gardens, their songs, their stubbornness. In the end, it seems it wasn't witchcraft that defined them. It was the way they endured. You visit the burial ground one last time. A new plaque has been installed at the edge. Bronze, weather-resistant, simple words. In memory of the wrongly accused and condemned. Let their names remind us that fear unchecked becomes cruelty, and silence allows it to grow. You touch the plaque, feeling the coolness of the metal. The words feel heavy but right. It's not closure, not exactly, but it's something that can live here quietly beside the rest of the town's breathing. A historian nearby is sketching. She's young, no older than 20, and you catch a glimpse of her notebook. Not just drawings of the square, but quotes questions and lines connecting ideas like a web of meaning. She notices your glance and says, "This place teaches more than it punishes," then goes back to sketching. The sky is a clean, pale blue now. You walk the paths slowly past fences mended by new hands, past homes whose doors no longer creak with fear. You pass the old parsonage and find it empty. Reverend Parris left years ago. No one talks about where he went, but the children play in the yard now. That feels like enough. You find a quiet bench on the edge of town. Sit, breathe. Let the air carry the sounds of the village around you, laughing, calling footsteps, chickens, firewood being split. It's all so ordinary, and that after everything feels extraordinary. You reflect one more time on the trials, the fear, the rage, the silence, the way people failed each other, and the way they tried eventually to fix it. Historians still debate what really caused the Salem witch trials, but as you sit here watching the village live again, it occurs to you that maybe the better question is, what stopped them? The answer is not clear-cut. It was tiredness. It was conscience. It was one person speaking out, then another, then another. It was grief reshaped into resolve. That's how hysteria ends, not always with a bang, but with a whisper that grows louder each day, and eventually becomes a song again. You stand, stretch, look to the hills. The wind rustles the grass, and for once it doesn't sound like anything ominous, just the sound of the world moving on. You walk back toward the village knowing this is the last time, but also knowing that the village will go on without you. Wiser, warmer, still learning. And that is the long, quiet story of Salem. A story not of witches, but of people. of what they feared, what they believed, and what they learned sometimes too late, but not always. The evening settles gently over Salem now, like a quilt pulled up to the chin. The last of the candles flickers out, and the village exhales in sleep. You step back into the rhythm of breath and breeze of old stories fading into the hush of night. The trees sway quietly, their branches no longer twisted with weight, but dancing. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then grows still. The streets are empty. The stars hang high and indifferent, watching over rooftops that no longer bear witness to fear, but to rest. You feel your body begin to soften. The pace slows. Your shoulders, heavy from the journey, begin to loosen. The names have been spoken, the story told. And now there is nothing left but peace. Let your mind drift gentle and unhurried. Let the sounds fall away. Let the quiet carry you. You are safe. You are warm. You are here. And Salem, like you, is finally at rest.